So now that we've had an overview of the metric system and looking at the different types of measurements that we use to identify different types of matter, we're going to just spend a little bit of time talking about how to convert within the metric system using what's called the ladder method. So the ladder method uses a kind of a stepwise system to take you from one part of a metric unit to another. So if we think about the basic unit being in the middle, that would be gram, meter, or liter. If you want to convert to a smaller unit, you would move your decimal point to the right, which is in a sense multiplying by 10. If you wanted to convert to a larger unit, you would move your decimal point to the left, which is the equivalent of dividing. So let's review what we're dealing with the different units. Kilo is 1,000 units. Hecto is equal to 100 of those units. And deca equals 10 units. So this is adding, or I should say multiplying by 10 each time. So if we start with one of the unit here, we multiply by 10 to get 10 of them. Multiply by another 10 to get the hecto, or 100 units, and yet another 100, multiply by 10 to get kilo, or 1,000 of those units. Now to go from the smaller than the basic unit, which would be meters, liters, or grams, we would move to the right. So if we divided by 10, we would have 1/10 of the unit. If we divided it by another 10, we would add an additional 0, which would get us to 1/100th of that unit. And then finally the milli, which would get us to 1,000th of the unit. And again, we are dividing by 10 each time. So how do we use the ladder method? First, you figure out your starting point. We're not always going to be starting with 1 of a unit. We might be starting with 100 of a unit, or 1/10 of a unit. You need to figure out where you're starting. And then count the jumps to your ending point. So if we're starting with meters, for instance, and we have to end up at millimeters, we have to figure out how many jumps we have. So in that case would be 1, 2, 3 jumps to the right. Then you would move the decimal the same number of jumps in that direction. So let's look at an example. Let's say we're starting with 4 kilometers. So 4 kilometers puts us right in this area here. And according to the problem, we need to figure out how to get to meters, which is over here, our basic unit. So if we're starting with kilometers and ending with meters, we need to figure out how many jumps that takes. 1, 2, 3 jumps to get from kilometers to the basic unit of meters. So if we start with 4.0, the decimal point is moving 1, 2, 3 places, and that's where we put the new decimal point for our new conversion. That gives us 4,000 meters. You would then put a 0 in each one of these spots, and that gives us 4,000 meters. So 4 kilometers equals 4,000 meters. All right, so let's practice this a little bit. I want you to take that same method, 1,000 milligrams in this example, and figure out how many grams there are. 14 kilometers, figure out how many meters that is. 1 liter, figure out how many milliliters that is. 109 grams, figure out how many kilograms that is, etc. So I want you to practice this on this sheet, or this part of the presentation that's on your worksheet. And then you've got another set of practices. You're writing the abbreviation for each metric unit. You're using the ladder method to try these conversions, and then you have a couple more at the back. And if you can practice these, we will go over them in class.